Welcome to NewsNation's Backscroll, where we look back at our major news coverage on the most important topics and personalities of our time. In just a few days, Gypsy Rose Blanchard is set to walk out of a state prison in Missouri. She served most of the 10-year sentence for murder, and not just any murder. Gypsy Rose helped plot the murder of her mother, Dee Blanchard, and she was granted parole back in September. Gypsy's abusive childhood is well documented. The misery that she suffered at the hands of a parent with a disorder called Munchausen by proxy. It drives a caregiver to make a child sick on purpose to get attention or sympathy or money. Gypsy pleaded guilty to second-degree murder after she and her boyfriend killed Dee Blanchard in 2015. But on December 28th, now at age 32, Gypsy will be a free woman on Thursday. I want to bring in Christy Blanchard. She is Gypsy Rose Blanchard's stepmom. Christy, it's so good of you to join us tonight. Thank you so much for this. You know, I suppose you could look at this as a kind of a late Christmas present, because I know that you and your husband Rod are really very, very much looking forward to, receiving her. What is the plan for Thursday? Tell us what you're going to do.
We're going to pretty much follow her lead, see how overwhelming she gets. And it's going to be a big adjustment. But we're going to do Christmas. Got a Christmas tree. We're going to put that up. Got her so many gifts. I went overboard, actually. But it's so hard to describe how I'm going to feel, how I'm going to react until I'm in the moment.
What does she want to do first?
Oh, we're doing a spa day. We booked a spa day. We're going to go get her pedicure, manicure, facial, haircut, colored if she wants. The works, bring her shopping. She can't wait to go clothes shopping with Mia. So it's going to be a full day of events the following day. Maybe that night that she gets released, we'll do the Christmas with her. Let her open a ton of gifts.
Some people who are watching, listen, the majority of people, I think, who've seen the documentaries and the dramatic, presentations of her life are very supportive of Gypsy Rose, believing she's a victim and she suffered horrendously at the hands of her mother for her entire life. There are others who feel she committed a murder and she was justly incarcerated. I would love to know how she feels about it. Does she feel like she should have spent time in prison? Like, where does she sort of fall on the responsibility spectrum?
We've talked about that actually a few times, and more or less, she said she's glad that she did go to prison because she would have probably stayed in that same pattern that her mom raised her to be, and with all the help and the classes that she took, she now recognizes that what's wrong from right. She has grown so much. It's unbelievable.
Christy, I learned something tonight I didn't know, and that is that Gypsy Rose got married while she was incarcerated. Can you tell me a little about that?
She sure did. She's been married for over a year. We support her in every way. We wish she would have waited, but at the end of the day, it's her decision. She's a grown woman, and I just pray and hope it works out. He's a great guy. He loves her so much. He's in it for all the right reasons. And I think that through all of this, he's one of her biggest support systems out here. And he lives in Louisiana, which is a big plus.
So they're going to live in Louisiana. And I should just mention, I think his name is Ryan, and I think he's a school teacher. Do you know anything else about him?
Oh, yeah. He's a school teacher. He loves wrestling, if I could say, he He's a genuine sweet guy. I adore him. He's very respectful. We're still learning him. We've been to his home once to meet his mom and his stepdad and everything, and they fit in well with us.
Well,
It's
listen, I know that you guys have been really busy doing documentaries, and I know you've got a couple things coming up as well. But I'd really love to invite you back on the program when Gypsy Rose is out, and be able to talk to you all as a family and to talk to her as well. Can we make that invitation and seal the deal tonight?
I guess we'll just figure it out and see how she does. I don't want to make a promise that I can't keep, but I'm sure she would like to, you know, that y'all have that one-on-one and get to know her, and she could tell a little bit more of her story.
Yeah, tell her story of her new life. Christy Blanchard, thank you so much on this Friday night right before Christmas for being a part of the program. It's good to meet you, and I'm really appreciative of this. Merry Christmas to you and your family.
Merry Christmas to you too, and hopefully we'll talk soon.
The baths that she said she was taking with her grandfather, that her grandfather took with her, those also happened with her mother?
Yeah, exactly. This is one of the more harsh details that you have to read, but obviously this is someone's story and she wants to share it all. It wasn't just her mother, but also her grandfather, and one time all three of them in the bath. It wasn't until she actually went to prison that she realized that it's not a very normal thing for adult women to actually do with each other. And so it's something that she's coming to grips with, the reality of her past and what's actually normal for an everyday person. But then on top of that, really excruciating details about getting clean in the bath with her mother. One detail I'll share with you is that her mother actually shaved her private parts down there. It was all about, in her mother's eyes, getting clean. She saw her daughter as a dirty girl, and so shaving her was a way to get her clean. And that's really a theme that you see throughout this entire book. How does one get clean? Not just in the sense of literally bathing, but also the dirtiness that she feels post-conviction, knowing full well that she was responsible for killing her mother, and that still weighs on her, and that's what makes her feel dirty.
Well, I'm going to just go one step further, and I'm guessing since her mother was desperate to convince everybody that she was so much younger than she was, maybe that was the ulterior motive, to take the razor to her little girl. That's just so disturbing. There's some mention about Dee Dee practicing witchcraft. What does Gypsy Rose say about that?
Yeah, this is very interesting because Gypsy says, even to this day, a part of her still believes her mother is a witch, because this was something that was so deeply ingrained into her when she was a child, that her mother possessed these supernatural powers, because she was constantly threatening her and saying that, I am going to conjure a spell to make sure that you behave because you've been such a bad girl. And she says, hey, look, moms and dads, I'm not condoning it, but if your child is out of line, that's a very powerful way to make sure that they do get in line, because she said that she was absolutely shocked and, completely still at all times, just out of fear that her mother might produce some sort of spell that actually harms her even further than what she was already feeling in the time. We know that she was bound in a wheelchair, and her mother's saying that I can make it even worse for you. And so to this day, she still believes a portion of that her mom has those powers. But there was several anecdotes in there about her mom going out and shopping, get a cow's tongue so that she can brew it into a potion. Really some dark and twisted things that her mother was doing to manipulate her.
Yeah, dark and twisted. She says she was tied to the bed. I think multiple times, but in one particular instance, it was because she had just dared to meet a man on Facebook.
Yeah, this was around the time that she was actually venturing with a laptop that she was given by some charitable organization. And so she was being very secretive, and she was creating social media accounts. And she actually met a guy in her 30s at this time, probably about 10 to 15 years older than Gypsy. And that sort of brewed into some sort of a relationship. And finally, when it all came out, obviously, Mom was not very pleased about that. And that's what you're alluding to. She actually beat her with a dog's leash, and then after that, tied her with that dog's leash to the bed for 2 full weeks, Ashley.
Something else I did not know, she went into prison with only a first grade education. Just so disturbing to hear that that's how sheltered this poor girl was, but that she managed to get her GED while behind bars and actually developed a best friend. What do we know about the best friend?
Yeah, actually, there were several inmates that she tried to have friendships with. She said this whole concept of actually having friends was a very difficult thing for her because she just didn't really have any growing up. And so all of a sudden, she's now seeing prison as sort of like a school where you actually can go around and try to make friends. And some were successes, other were failures. For example, one inmate really she confided to, sharing a lot about her history and some of her secrets. That inmate just turned right around, spilled the beans, and told the warden about all those secrets in a way to try to get a plea deal. So that was a friendship gone wrong. One that she still believes is one of her closest friends to this day is also a woman at that same correctional facility that was convicted of a very similar crime. She and her boyfriend also killed their mother. And so that was something that they really bonded about and able to share that past trauma and abuse and find healing together.
Well, we have a major update in the case of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. She was convicted of playing a key role in murdering her mother back in 2015. Now, Gypsy has been granted parole after serving 7 of her 10-year sentence, with her release date now set for late December. She did plead guilty in 2016 for her role in the killing of her mother, Claudine Dee Blanchard, after admitting she arranged for her boyfriend at the time, this man, Nicholas Gojan, to kill her mother after she endured years of abuse. Now, Gojan was also found guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. So in all of the investigation, it was revealed Dee had fabricated all of Gypsy's medical issues, convincing her friends and family that her daughter had leukemia, muscular dystrophy, asthma, brain damage, saying that it limited her mental capacity to that of a 7-year-old, all of which were lies. Gypsy said in court her mother forced her to use a wheelchair and undergo unnecessary medical tests to collect gifts and donations. Experts say Dee had Munchausen syndrome by proxy. That's a mental disorder in which a caretaker fabricates illness in another person, all to garner attention. All right, here with us now to break down the case, let's bring in NewsNation legal contributor Jesse Weber. Jesse, thank you for your time here. This is a case that so many people followed. How unusual is an early release after a second-degree murder conviction, or is this in part due to all of the unusual circumstances here?
It's an unusual case. I remember covering it back in the day. And we have to remember she pled guilty to second-degree murder, not first-degree murder. And under Missouri law, she would have had the opportunity to be released early. See, she is about to have served 85% of a 10-year sentence, which under Missouri law grants her the ability to be paroled, to leave prison early. So there's nothing abnormal about this. Now, having said it, one of the advantages that prosecutors took here was for her to plead guilty to second-degree murder, the lesser charge, not first degree, because she was one of the state's key witnesses in their prosecution of her co-conspirator, Nicholas Godejohn. He was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. So many times we see these cases where deals are worked out with one person so that they can testify against another, particularly in this case where the argument was more blame was put on him than it was on Gypsy.
You know, and Jesse, what likely happens for Gypsy Rose now? I mean, she never really lived a normal life, and then she went to prison.
So let's be clear. What she did was horrifying. It was terrible. It was illegal. It was wrong. But there's a part of it where you have to feel terrible for what happened to her, right? Because she was a victim in this as well. Whenever I covered this case, I said, there's so many victims in this case. Life is not going to be easy for her. A, getting over the fact that she was a victim of her mother for so many years and being convinced that she was sick when she wasn't. B, being implicated in the murder of her mother. C, spending all this time in prison and now being released into the world where everybody is going to know what she did. And there's a stigma that comes along with that, even when people are released. So she's going to have a tough time. I would imagine she might do an interview, maybe tell her side of the story once again, because people haven't been talking about Gypsy Rose in a while, and maybe she wants to give her narrative once more.
Yeah, and this is certainly a case that, when people see her, they hear a few of the details, it starts to come back. Jesse, what about the ex-boyfriend in this case, Nicholas Godejohn? He was sentenced, as we said, to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now here's Gypsy Rose, who will be out of prison in December. Is that justice? Because as you said, at the heart of this, there is still a woman who lost her life.
It's a great question. Nicholas Godejohn has always said that he felt he was manipulated in all this by Gypsy. We know that he's an individual who's lived with autism. That became a central issue in his case. But we also remember that during the course of that trial, there were so many graphic parts of this murder, the planning, what happened during the course of the murder, things that were said, that were all put on Nicholas Godejohn. And so I think when you look at this, what is justice? Nothing's going to bring Dee Dee back. Nothing's going to fix the early part of Gypsy's life. But Nicholas Godejohn is the one who stabbed Dee Dee Blanchard to death. He is the one that took that knife and ultimately brutally killed her. And there's nothing that can excuse that. So it's not surprising that he was ultimately convicted of first-degree murder. And under the state law, he is going to spend the rest of his life in prison unless he can mount a successful appeal, which may not be likely.
And Jesse, as we're talking and this video is playing and we're seeing these images, there was a movie about this, there was a TV series about this case. Do you think there's more to this story that we will find out once Gypsy Rose is a free woman?
Absolutely. There are still so many unanswered questions about why she did this, what was her relationship like with her mother, because we don't usually hear this. We've heard of cases of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, but nothing like this. And I think there is still an immense interest in what happened in this case, understanding what her life was like and seeing how she can move forward. So I would say we know a lot, but I think we're going to learn a lot more when she's released in December.
Well, NewsNation legal contributor Jesse Weber, thank you.
I'm joined now by Gypsy's stepmom, Christy Blanchard, and I'm so happy to have you on the program again. Thank you for doing this tonight. I'm very excited about the show tomorrow, but I just want to ask how Gypsy's doing. It's been a week now since she's been out.
She's doing really well. She's adjusting. Like you said earlier, she's making Ryan's home her home. I told her, move all his stuff out of the closet, take it over. She is adjusting as well, beyond what I expected so quickly, but she said she feels at home and she feels at peace.
What did she not expect? Like, what is she struggling with? I know some inmates, they will get out of prison and they hadn't seen an iPhone before. Like, there's certain little details that kind of shock them. 8 years is a long time, especially growing up as she did in prison. What has been tough for her?
I think really the toughest thing for her with her phone is New Year's Eve, we were at her house and she's like, somebody keeps calling my phone and I don't know who it is. And I looked at the number and it was her grandmother. It was Rod's mom. And I'm like, well, that's your grandmother. I'm like, why you didn't store it? She's like, I don't know how. So I stored a couple of numbers for her, but she's learning quick. She is learning it real quick. And I really thought she'd have it attached by her hip by now, but she makes a post, she puts it down, and she just goes back and does what she wants to do.
So I know that she, got married while she was incarcerated and then was sort of physically able to be with her husband for the first time when she was released. But it is really difficult, for most people when they get married, to go on the honeymoon and be with their new spouse. This had to be especially sort of tough, a real adjustment. And I would guess for both of them, but how has it been for her?
I was nervous for her, at first, because they've visited, in prison and they talk on the phone a lot. And that's a form of intimacy right there. And they bonded over that. But I was worried, okay, what's going to happen when you get out? We had that talk. And she said it was everything she expected it to be. It was wonderful. It was beautiful. They did stay at a hotel the night she got released. well, the morning that she got released, and she said it was wonderful. I'm not going to talk for her about experiences behind those doors, but she was happy.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. That must have been a nervous time. I mean, I can't imagine sort of meeting your husband physically, really, for the first time after that long relationship apart. So in the documentary, Gypsy says that she reveals things that even the family didn't know. Do you now know? Like, has she at least let on? And were there surprises for you?
There was one surprise. When they asked me how did I feel about when Gypsy shot Dee Dee. And I was like, what? They were like, you don't know? I'm like, no, I think I would remember that. And she hadn't told her dad either. So that, you know, it was a BB gun, of course. And I mean, that was pretty shocking. I did know about what her grandfather done to her. She told me, I want to say 1 or 2 years in, and she had asked me not to tell her dad. She wanted to tell him when she was ready. So when she confessed, you know, told him about it, he called me. He's like, why you didn't tell me? I said, she told me not to tell you. You know, so he learned that on camera as well, but I had knew.
And, you know, the grandfather has put out a reaction to that, saying it's an unusual reaction. I don't know that I've heard this one before, but he denies that he molested Gypsy and said that Gypsy was the one touching him from the age of 4 and that he told her no. Do you have a response to that? Does Gypsy have a response to that?
I mean, I'm not going to speak on her behalf on how she feels about it, but I think it's really messed up. I can't even imagine. It's gross. It is. I mean, yes, he denies it. She swears it's the truth. You know, I mean, what we going to do? There's really nothing, you know. I believe her. I believe it's happened, because how she's explained it to me, it was pretty much in detail. And she shouldn't be taken aback with her grandfather anyway.
I was just about to ask if you're able to share the details that she shared, and you're saying that there was a bath when she was a youngster?
Yeah, from things that she's told me in that aspect, that he would take a bath with her. I mean, you don't do that at all.
Did she share any other details?
Yeah, she shared some, but I'd rather not. It's her story, you know, to go into detail. It could be all in the book, which I was surprised when they did ask him. I had told the producer, if you're going to ask him that question, make sure you're running out the door, because I didn't know what his reaction would be, and he just denied it. But if he did it, he has to live with it.
What was Gypsy's husband's reaction to that information?
To be totally honest, I have no idea. I don't know what she told him, or, you know, or how she told him. I guess because, you know, we were in the moment celebrating her return, and none of that came up. We haven't talked about it. I never reached out and discussed it with him, because at that time I didn't know what he knew.
I also wanted to ask you, I have watched the Mommy, Dead and Dearest. That's the documentary. There's also the fictionalized program called The Act about Gypsy Rose's story. There's so much out there that people have consumed about the story. Is there something about what Dee Dee did all those years that we don't know yet?
Not really. I mean, there's a couple of things that she's done to me. She even called the priest and told them that he couldn't marry us because they were still married. She's pulled some doozies, I'll say. Yeah. She tried to do everything to ruin our relationship.
And it sounds like she may have done the same to her father and her father's wife as well. They seem to make some pretty strong allegations that Dee Dee tried to kill her stepmother at some point. At least, I should say that's in the documentary. It's what they said in the documentary, which leads me to that question. Does Gypsy Rose plan to watch all of the content that's out there, the Act and the Mommy Dead Dearest? I mean, does she want to watch those stories about her?
We've talked about it several times. The only one she's interested in, besides this one that's coming out, is the HBO documentary Mommy Dead and Dearest. The Act, she doesn't really want to watch it, but curiosity, I think she'll end up watching it one day. I've only watched it once. Rod only watched, I think, one episode, and he had enough. So I guess when she's ready, curiosity, you know, it's going to happen probably, but I don't know when.
And of course, the Act is the fictionalized, dramatic presentation of Gypsy Rose's life. So because there's so much out there, because so many true crime fans have followed not only the story of Gypsy, but also her social media. I think she's, at last count, you know, around 6 million followers with Instagram and TikTok maybe combined. That means she's now a public figure. Is there any concern about her safety, and are you all doing anything to ensure that she's going to be okay in her newfound freedom, but also newfound fame?
Yeah, I mean, we want to get someone to help her, you know, control her social media, because she's still learning. She has a couple of stalkers out there, I'm not going to lie, some that are quite disturbing. But as her being safe at home, I think she's going to be okay. If worse comes to worse, we'll hire someone for security. I'm just hoping that the creeps stay away from her, you know? That's how we could hope for her. But
can you expand on that, the creeps, and what has been said? Like, what kind of outreach has been made that's been disquieting or disturbing from some of those people?
Well, there's one in particular. He was saying he wanted to be there when she got released and hoping that they take a picture of him and saying boyfriend is helping save Gypsy from paparazzi. He wanted to do that. He found out he had my personal phone number and address. And it's just creepy. He's really creepy. He has made multiple accounts trying to add, you know, me, and I figured out quick that it was this person in particular, and if he keeps up, legal action will be taken. He is not from Louisiana.
So that sounds like, you know, an uncomfortable fan. Have there been any dangerous threats made? Has she felt uncomfortable about some of the threats or more cruel kinds of comments?
I told her try not to read the comments, but New Year's Eve we were talking and she felt kind of a little bummed, and she was like, people could be rude. And I said, Gypsy, you know, let's say there's 200 comments and maybe a handful might be, you know, not so nice. I said, but the replies under it are people defending you. I said, but they're irrelevant. You know, just ignore it. They don't know you. They think they know you, but they don't.
Has she got sort of a career path planned ahead?
Yes, she does. The day she got out, she told me she didn't realize how big the story was. And I was like, well, no, you've been sheltered. But she definitely wants to use this to be an advocate, to be an influencer, to help, you know, kids that have been in this situation and that their eyes are opening up. if she could save one life, I think her, you know, it's a big deal. It is a very big deal. If she could just save one, now if she could save more, that's even better. She will be having her memoir book come out, and we'll be doing more other things in the future. We're going to try to get her to go to schools and anywhere that we can that she could tell her story, and hopefully
So
someone
she's,
thinks that
if I read you right, Christy, yeah, if I read you right, Christy, she wants to get into advocacy. She wants to give speeches. She wants to help other kids. Like does that sound about right? She sort of wants to go on the circuit of helping others?
You are absolutely right. That's exactly what she wants to do. She has a voice. Everyone is all about Gypsy right now. Use it, take it, you know, take advantage of it. Why not?
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. And, you know, and I think that she's walked in those shoes for her entire 3 decades. So that's an advocacy ambassador right there. Can I ask you this, just from a personal level, Christy? I saw you in the documentary, you know, visiting Gypsy Rose, you and your husband, her father, and you would embrace in the visitors' room, but then that was it. Then you had to separate, and I can imagine that was pretty heartbreaking. What was that moment like when you first had that chance to embrace when she walked out of that prison facility for good?
I didn't want to let her go. You know, I let her go to her dad. You know, he deserved it. He deserved that first hug. I just sat down and waited. And when she came up to me and hugged me, I was like, is this for real? Is this really happening? I wondered how it was going to feel and the emotions. And I cried a lot that day, happy tears. But I didn't want to let her go, but I sat in awe all that day and was just looking at her, like, just to see her talking to her friends, hanging out with her sister, talking to her dad. It was so good to see. It was just surreal.
Well, I can see the sign that you put up in balloons saying "Welcome Home." That must have been very special for you as a family, especially in the holiday season as well. I can't thank you enough for this, you know, Christy, because this has been a big time for you, and to carve out some of it to share with me and with our viewers, it's really appreciated. I'm wishing you and your family the best for 2024, and hoping all good things come with it.
Thank you so much for allowing me to come back and talk to you.
Gypsy Rose Blanchard has her life back, though it may be more accurate to say that she is actually living her life for the very first time. But the man that she conspired with for the murder that sent her to prison, well, that guy is still locked up, and he will be for the rest of his life. Nicholas Godejohn was convicted of the actual hands-on stabbing of Gypsy Rose's mother, Dee Dee. That was in 2015. And since then, his attorneys have tried multiple times to get him a new trial. And their latest appeal claims that Godejohn is, quote, he has a diminished capacity. And they say it's due to autism and a low IQ. In short, they say that Gypsy's boyfriend at the time, who stabbed Dee Dee Blanchard 17 times, was manipulated to do that by someone who was smarter, a.k.a. Gypsy Rose. That is his strategy. And I want to bring in Mark Garagos, legendary trial lawyer and co-host of the Reasonable Doubt podcast, with Adam Carolla. Look, you're the lawyer in this conversation, my friend, but I always thought the time to bring up diminished capacity is when you're at trial, not after you've been convicted and you want another bite at the apple.
Yeah, well, you're, as a non-lawyer, as always, Ashley, you're very perceptive. What they're trying to say now is that his lawyer at the time didn't do enough, was ineffective in not bringing up a diminished capacity defense. Diminished capacity defense, for people who aren't in the weeds here, basically attacks what's called mens rea, the mental state of the defendant. And you're trying to say that if the mental state was diminished or impacted, that therefore you didn't have the ability to form malice, which is required for murder. If that were the case, if he was convicted of manslaughter because he didn't have malice, he wouldn't be in custody. That's their argument.
So what are they going for here? They want a new trial, and they want the charge not to be murder, but manslaughter, which would give him a long sentence, but he'd get out. Is that effectively the strategy?
Well, it's effectively, if you get a new trial, he would have the ability to interpose, to plead a diminished responsibility, diminished capacity defense. The reason I call it either one, in California, they eliminated it. You remember, Ashley, the Harvey Milk and George Moscone murder and the Dan White Twinkie defense. That was what caused the elimination of diminished responsibility in California. You had Dan White, who was accused of the murder. He claimed, or he got a forensic person up there to claim, that he had eaten too much sugar and Twinkies, and that caused a mental condition that didn't allow him to be convicted of murder and just manslaughter. Here you're saying this person was under the Svengali-like influence of the woman who your package just mentioned, Gypsy, and that because of that Svengali-like influence, he didn't have the capacity to form the malice which is necessary for murder. And if he got a new trial, he would prove that. And his lawyers were ineffective for not pursuing that the first time around. That's the argument.
And I have to leave it there, but I do want to just read this really quickly, because if you're thinking about the Svengali type mind, I want to read from Gypsy's book. She writes, Nick sent me a letter in 2019, about 4 years after he got sentenced. I had entered a relationship with a man named Ken, who'd become my fiance for a brief time, which angered Nick. He found out about my engagement and even Ken's full name through the access he had to my depositions. I wish I had saved the letter to share, but basically Nick said I was committing adultery, that he had taken my virginity, which he didn't, and by God's law, we were married. The letter was reminiscent of his dominant role that he was obsessed with playing out when we had our internet relationship. It's fascinating to hear how eloquent and smart she is, and whether he's going to use that, if he gets a shot to try to prove it. As always, I adore you, Mark Garagos. You're like one of the best law professors I've ever had. Just wish I got the JD. Thanks for being on.
Thank you.
Many people who believe she should be able to enjoy this moment considering everything she has been through. Back with me, Geraldo Rivera, the veteran journalist, Ashley Banfield, host of Banfield here on NewsNation, and Jesse Weber, NewsNation legal contributor. Jesse, you said you feel strongly about this one.
What happened to her was terrible. Let's be very clear. What happened to her was terrible. This idea that they're going on a media tour and praising her, she didn't just help with the murder, Dan. She pled guilty to second-degree murder. She planned it. She gave the gloves. She gave the knife. She gave the duct tape. She was right there when the murder happened. She posted on social media a horrible message about her mother to maybe get police's attention. So this idea, she's out now. Should she live a free life? Yes, absolutely. But the idea of asking her about dating questions, praising her, putting her on podcasts, I'm disturbed by it. I covered this trial when it happened, and I had a feeling this was going to happen when she was released. I'm bothered by it. That's just maybe.
Geraldo, you?
Everything from The View to TikTok. I thought the TikTok interview was probably most flamboyant. I'm kind of torn. I don't really care about Gypsy Rose going around and telling her tale, her story. What the mother did with this Munchausen by proxy syndrome is so weird to me, to keep a child appearing, actually inflicting ailments using drugs to make her sick, make your own daughter sick, so it's not Gypsy Rose, God bless her, let her rest in peace. I'm not particularly sympathetic to her, to Dee Dee, let her go. Gypsy Rose, she did her time. If they want to put her on TV, you don't get anywhere complaining.
So on
about
ABC,
it.
they actually confronted her about this. Let's play this piece of sound, and then I want to ask Ashley for a reaction.
Do you feel any conflict with that? You've got fame, even though you participated in a murder?
Of course I feel conflicted. Fame is not what I'm looking for. I always said I think I'm infamous, and then I came out famous.
Are you enjoying the attention?
Honestly, I'm a very shy person. I don't think that I'm doing anything that anybody else wouldn't do. I'm being myself.
Ashley Banfield, your take.
Yeah, there's one person who's not vibing on her relationship goals, etc., and that's actually Gypsy Rose. Interestingly enough, while all the hullabaloo is going on around her, she's pretty grounded, and she's pretty focused on helping in the future, helping people like her. She herself has admitted, look, I didn't do the right thing. My mother should be here, but she should be in jail where I was. I want to bring in Dr. John Fabian now. He is a forensic psychologist and a neuropsychologist who's worked with Gypsy Rose as she prepared for life after prison. His new book, Forensic Neuroscience and Violence, will be out later this month. Doctor, it's so great of you to be here tonight. Thank you for this. I'm fascinated to talk to you. First question is an easy one. What was it like working with Gypsy Rose?
Thanks for having me. It was quite interesting. Factitious disorder imposed on another, Munchausen syndrome, is really rare. One in maybe 200,000 children have this, experience, and it's certainly traumatic. So it was quite interesting to see this type of case. Gypsy herself was more normal than you'd expect, and she's a survivor, certainly.
Were you surprised at all that she admitted to and did the act of using opioids before and during prison to cope with what she was going through?
With the level of trauma she had, no. If I recall correctly, her mother put a peg tube into her stomach to feed her, and there was sometimes opiates that she would feed her in order to get through some of these medical appointments. So Gypsy would be more of like a zombie. She had used the drugs with Nick as well and abused them. So it's a coping mechanism, certainly self-medication, because she has psychiatric conditions.